My name's Matt Widgery from FramedPlanet.com. Welcome to episode 2 of the Framed Planet podcast, the best place on the internet to get your photography, news and entertainment. So coming up in the next 20 minutes or so, we've got 4 stories for you. One of them is a very, very tragic story. We'll get that off our chests first because it has truly shocked not just the photographic community, but around the world. This is reverberated. This is the story of a photographer and reporter who were brutally killed on air during a live broadcast this morning from Virginia in the United States, and so we will be having a look in detail at that story and giving you some of the information there. Next, the 3 stories after that will have something in common with each other. They are all about gear for all you camera heads out there. These are 3 of the most anticipated cameras of the last little while in photography, and I know that each one has its own very specific fan base. There are pros and cons to each of these cameras, and of course I'm talking about the Leica S Type 007, the Olympus OMD EM10 II, and the possible, rumoured but not quite confirmed yet, replacement for the Fuji X100T, which may possibly, but not confirmed yet, rumoured, come out as early as September this year. But first of all, of course, let's just take a moment to look at this story from Virginia, which is very, very sad. 2 members of a television news crew were murdered, that's the only way for it, brutally slain live on air this morning in Virginia in the United States. They work for a station called WDBJ7. Photographer Adam Ward and reporter Alison Ward they died this morning at around 6:45 a.m. while giving a live broadcast. And another victim was also hospitalized during the attack. Now, this was being, of course, filmed at the time, and the shooter has been identified from the video as the camera collapsed to the floor, and there is a very chilling still that can be seen on the FramePlanet.com website on this article, where you can see the gunman clearly holding a handgun and pointing it sort of directly towards the camera. He's been identified as a disgruntled employee, a man called Vesta Flanagan, and the police are searching him at the moment. He got away from the scene, it looks like, at the time, and they are now looking for him. Police have not apprehended any suspects at the time, but they have issued a BOLO, which is a be on the lookout for Mr. Flanagan. Now, clearly, this is a very, very sad story. It's something which has absolutely rocked this station. They were a very tight-knit community, and in fact, Alison Parker, I said Alison Ward before, I apologise, Alison Parker was actually in a relationship with another member of staff there. They were about to move in together, and of course, that's just cut them up as a loss. This is a small station, and it looks like they were very close, a very tight-knit family, and it's very, very sad that this has happened. It's very sad whenever this stuff happens, and it is tragically all too often when some crazed gunman these days seems to be getting loose, breaking into places and trying to settle scores by killing innocent people, and it is just not good enough. You know, this is just a horrible, horrible thing, and there's no way that there's anything justified about this. It is just disgusting. If you were a news reporter, maybe if you were in a war situation, you might expect to get shot at. It would be horrible if you were, and of course there are photographers that do get killed on the battlefield. But this wasn't that. This was a local report coming from somewhere locally, not in a war zone, but just in a town in Virginia. And it is absolutely tragic that this has happened. So Framed Planet send their thoughts out. I send my thoughts out to the family. And I'm sure I can speak for the rest of the photographic community in wishing all the best to the families of Alison Parker and Adam Ward, and this very, very difficult time for them. So that's that. Now we're going to change gear slightly and talk about 3 very different stories, or very different from that first story, but they are actually very similar to each other. And that is the 3 new cameras that have been announced. 2 have been announced officially, and one of them is still in the rumour stage, but it's exciting and it's tantalising for a couple of reasons. We'll come on to that one last. So first of all, let's have a look at probably the least surprising of the 3. This is the Leica S Type 007, which, as well as having a rather wonderful James Bond moniker, is finally announced after a build-up of some 12 months. It was back in Photokina last year in 2014 that Leica actually announced this camera as a basically replacement to the Leica S Type 006, as it was kind of called, well, is kind of being called now, although at the time it was just called the Leica S, which in turn replaced another thing called the Leica S or something. Okay, let's be honest, with Leica, the names, the nomenclature has gone completely out of the wall. It's all very confusing, it's difficult to say, it's difficult to remember what one is, and it's all slightly barking. But that's kind of why we love Leica, isn't it? That's what we all enjoy about them. We love them because they don't use autofocus in the digital age. We loved the Leica edition because they took the LCD screen off and made us pretend that it was a film camera, and you had to look at the computer on the when you got back home to see what your images were. They took the LCD screen off that one and put a ISO dial on there, which was wonderful. It was kooky and bonkers, just the sort of thing that you would expect from Leica. And of course, having took the LCD screen off the Leica edition, by the way, they charged twice the money of the standard M. So let's have a look at this one. This is something a little bit different for the rangefinder fans out there. They probably won't be that interested in it. This is designed more as a studio camera. This is the big medium format camera that they do, which is a giant SLR shaped camera really. But it's a weird one because it doesn't have a standard medium format size sensor. It's actually smaller than the sensors that you would get in its rivals from things like Hasselblad's, Phase 1's, and of course the new kid on the block, but probably the one that's newest and has caused the most attention in the recent, probably 18 months or so, which is the Pentax 645, all of which use a bigger sensor than the much more expensive German super brand camera that we see here. So it is a larger format camera, larger format sensor than a 35mm. It is CMOS, which is a improvement and does help with low light ability, but let's be honest, this is not a low light camera. And despite the fact that it uses a CMOS sensor and the fact that it's got a large sensor in itself, it really does not hold up very well in low light. It actually gives up at around about ISO 3200 before you do start to get noise creeping into there. It will lighten your bank balance by $16,900 at B&H currently. That's what they're asking for that. So it is going to be one of those cameras that if you are interested in it, you're going to get it regardless. You're going to get it because of that red dot. You're going to get it because of the build quality, and the image quality is going to be beautiful. But there are other cameras with basically more megapixels. This is 37.5 megapixels, which is exactly the same as its predecessor. They haven't really increased anything there. There's a lot which is basically identical to the camera before, which they're now doing at a discount rate. You can get it a lot cheaper. You can save yourself a few $1,000s if you want the one that came out previously to it, and there isn't that much difference, honestly. So it's an interesting one. It will be something which the aficionados of these cameras absolutely love, and if you do have some of the lenses from the last one and you just want to upgrade it, maybe there's an argument for that. But if you are getting into medium format, I would probably recommend something like the Pentax 645Z. It's got a larger sensor, it's half the money, and it is a very, very accomplished camera. So let's see what happens in terms of sales. I mean, the last one didn't sell a huge amount for Leica, I don't think. It's just not their real sort of prime market, but it does obviously catch a lot of attention when a new Leica comes out. Personally, I think in recent times, the Leica Q is more interesting than the Leica S, but that's just me. So the next one is probably a little bit more of a standard camera and will certainly sell, I'm sure, in bigger numbers. This is the replacement to the slightly long in the tooth, or the longest in the tooth out of all the Olympus OMD series, which is the EM10. It was due for an upgrade, certainly, and this one doesn't disappoint. This one, actually, the EM10-2 brings the 5-axis stabilisation to the EM10 range. This is something that we've seen already on the EM1 and the EM5, and it's fabulous. It means you can mount any lens to it and it will work with image stabilization, which is absolutely fantastic. Really, really good for doing video and absolutely fantastic for doing stills as well. It means you can handhold old lenses, vintage lenses, anything that hasn't got in-body image stabilization already in it to, insane shutter stops. And that's really, really something which is incredibly nice to see. As well as having the lovely IBIS, it also sports slightly more sort of grown-up feeling materials. It's got some new metal dials on it and a kind of leather. It's like a leather finish or leather texture, they're saying. I don't know if it's actually real leather, but they're saying it's going to be leather texture on the grip there, which is going to make the whole thing feel a little bit more upmarket. And honestly, for $650 in the US for the body only, it just seems like a very good deal to me. Other features, it does 8.5 frames per second, but you're probably not going to be shooting sport with it. It has much more emphasis on low light than previous editions and will shoot natively from 200 to I think 25,600 ISO on that one. So it really is going to be a much better camera than one might expect for these small sensor micro 4/3 cameras in low light. Olympus are doing very well. They're absolutely smashing it at the moment. The company's profits are showing it too, and it's really interesting. There is this huge divide between the profitability of companies like Sony and companies like Olympus and companies like Panasonic, who are all doing the mirrorless stuff, and the profits of Nikon and Canon, which are going really the other way round. And if you have a look at their sort of Q1 and Q2 reports, they're just tanking right now because they're not selling any cameras. The DSLR market is shrinking. It isn't going to go away. So anybody that jumps on me for saying that this is, I'm just, bringing up mirrorless because I shoot Fujis and whatever else, I don't think DSLR are going away. I don't think medium format's going away. But the reality is that there are certain sectors of the camera market which are doing better than others, and no doubt about it, it is the mirrorless people that seem to be doing the best. They're making the most innovative cameras, they're selling more cameras more than anybody else, and therefore their companies are being more profitable, and that long term is really the only thing that will keep these companies in survival. Now it'll be interesting to see what happens with Nikon and Canon. We are starting to see a few little rumblings from both companies. The Canon EOS M looks like it's going to have an update for next year with some new lenses coming out, and Nikon have just launched a new lens for their tiny sensor, little Nikon J1 thingy, although that is a frankly idiotic camera, and they should really replace it with something with a larger sensor if they're going to compete with the big boys. But we shall see what happens there. Now, for the Fuji fanboys out there, and I include myself in that one, Fuji Rumors, a source close to Fuji Rumors, has hinted at a replacement to Fujifilm's popular high-end fixed lens rangefinder style mirrorless camera, the X100T. Although this has only been out for a year, the X100T, it was only a year before that the X100S came out, so it is possible that we could be getting a launch round about September of this year if they are true to form. Now, there are two particularly interesting things about this rumour that make it rather exciting, not just for people that are looking for the next fixed lens camera from Fuji, but for those of us that have an X Pro 1 and have been waiting since 2012 for an X Pro 2, this could be very, very exciting. Now, first of all, before we come on to that, let's have a look at why the fixed lens people should be excited. It looks as if the customers could be treated to a new lens, so an update to the 23mm f2 that has been on the X100 series since the X100S, possibly even on the X100, I don't remember now, but certainly the X100S and the X100T. It's a very good lens, but they are looking potentially at upgrading that. Now, whether that means that they're going to do anything exciting, like make it faster, could we be seeing a 23 1.4 like the interchangeable lens 23mm 1.4 that you can get for your XT1 or XE2 or whatever? Could they be doing something like a 23mm 1.8 somewhere in the middle, something like that? It'd be interesting to see. Is it going to be simply something which has got different coatings on it? So it might be something which allows more light transmittance, less glare, that kind of thing. Could be something along those lines. It's unlikely, although it isn't impossible, that they could be changing the focal length. The 23mm lens is, some people consider that pretty wide. It works out at about a 35mm equivalence on full frame, and it is favoured a lot by street shooters. So it's kind of interesting for that, but some people like to shoot something more equivalent to a 40 or a 50mm. Other people like something wider as well, and one interesting thing that they could be doing is going out wider and maybe doing an 18mm f2, which would give you an equivalent of something like 28. So that could be interesting. I know a lot of street photographers, people like Daide Moriyama, for example, would shoot cameras like the old Ricoh GR film series, which had a 28mm lens. which was a lot wider, and they even made, I think, a 24mm version of that camera, and I think even a 21mm version of that camera. Now, the equivalent on a crop sensor body there, you'd be looking at, for the 24mm, it'd be around about a 16, and for the 21mm, you'd be looking at, I can't do the maths now, but about like 11 or 12 or something like that. So really, really wide. So that could be interesting. Really could be interesting. So we don't know that, but there are some speculations about there being a new lens. My personal prediction on that is that it's probably just going to be an update to the 23mm focal length, possibly slightly wider, but possibly just with slightly different glass elements in it to improve optical quality in some way. We shall see on that one. But there is another rumor about this camera, which is why the X Pro brigade, myself included, are very, very, very excited indeed. And that is that they are possibly going to use a brand new sensor in it, which could be the sensor that would then be used in the X Pro 2. So if this camera does appear next month with a new sensor, that could be the debut of the sensor that we see in the X Pro 2. And the most exciting thing about that is that most of the speculation about why it's taken Fuji so long to get to the X Pro 2 is because they've been figuring out the best sensor to use. Now, we don't know if that's true. These are all rumors and speculations, but for whatever reason, it has taken Fuji 3 years to launch this camera. And in the meantime, they've brought out, regular yearly updates of the X100 series. They brought out the XT10 and the XT1. They did an XE2 as an update to the XE1. So there's been a lot of iterations of their other cameras, and they obviously have been holding back something special to put in the X Pro 2. And as well as having all the other things that we've asked for, like better autofocus and weather sealing and better video and all that kind of stuff, maybe this new sensor could be the thing that we've been waiting for, and we could be looking at seeing it for the very first time as early as next month. These are all unconfirmed rumors, ladies and gentlemen, so don't get too excited as yet, but I shall keep you posted, and as soon as I know anything more, I will let you know. As always, all of the links to the articles that I've been mentioning in this podcast will be available in the show notes, and you can always head over to framedplanet.com to get your best and latest photo news and entertainment. So thanks very much for watching if you're watching it on YouTube. Thanks very much for listening if you're listening to the podcast, and thanks as always for reading the website. Cheers.